Hey art folks, it's Sade, and today I'm bringing you another cheap versus expensive art supply video. This time we're going to be looking at 3 gouache brands: Reeves, Arteza, and Holbein. All of these brands are pretty new to me, so the results were pretty interesting to me as well. First up, we have Reeves. This brand is surprisingly not the cheapest of all 3 brands featured. It's slightly beat out by the Arteza gouache. I have the 12 pack of colors. Reeves is actually Winsor Newton's basic line of paints, so they have the Winsor Newton's Professional, and they have the Cotman, and they also have the Reeves line, which is a throwback to Reeves actually being the person who invented watercolor in pans. So I'm going to be honest here and say that the Reeves actually did way better than I thought it would. The biggest problem with the Reeves paint is the consistency. It is just so weird and gloopy and globby, and adding water doesn't really help anything. As you'll see as I'm going around, the colors are pretty muted because it was really easy to get muddy colors while you're mixing. I like to use a technique that you darken colors using the complementary color instead of using black, and that is a technique that is really hard to achieve with cheaper paints because your colors are most likely just turn to brown instead of going black, and that is exactly what happened here. Obviously, using black is not necessarily a problem, but sometimes it can cool down your colors too much, and that's what ended up happening because I had to use black in order to get any darker colors. It was really difficult to get the white to be like really, really white. Some of these white spots I took layers and layers and layers of white on, and it did not work. One thing that's nice is that since it does have kind of muddier colors, it did give some more natural feeling colors on the leaves. Of course, Reeves has no pigment information. They don't promise anything, so you can probably just assume that light fastness is not there at all, which is a big problem if you want to keep your work for a long time or if you're ever planning on selling them. And also, because of the weird texture of Reeves, it's really hard to get details. I used the exact same paper and the exact same brushes for all of these paintings. It's the Clairefontaine paint on paper. And it was just so hard to get details because the consistency of the Reeves gouache was just so thick that it just couldn't go down in a nice thin line. Also, it just refused to come off of my brush sometimes. I'd be scrubbing my brush in the water and it was just like clinging to it. It was kind of weird. But I mean, in the end, the painting is not the worst, right? Next up is Arteza, and even though I could have gotten it for free, I did intentionally buy the 24 set of Arteza gouache with my own money. The biggest plus point for the Arteza is that it is actually slightly cheaper than the Reeves, but the consistency is way better, and that is a really important thing when you are looking at gouache. It actually has a consistency that is not difficult to work with, and that is so huge. So it was like I took off hard mode gouache painting and now I was on okay mode. Normal mode? Yeah. I'm not really a big fan of the color selection in the 24 pack. I'm like, where is there a magenta? The greens are also kind of weird. They have one color that's called sap green, and I have never in my life seen a sap green that looks like that. But overall, the color choices are kind of like unnatural. And I'm not saying, oh, they're super saturated, so they're unnatural. No, they're just like weird. But I was able to obviously paint this painting. I don't really like the packaging of the Arteza tubes. Actually, that was really annoying because the tubes hurt my hands every time I was using them, even if I wasn't taking off a bunch of them. I have some difficulties with my hands, so maybe that's why, but I haven't had that issue with any other gouache tubes. Also, I basically think you should probably ignore most of the information that's on the tubes. The information makes the paint look fancier than it is because you're used to associating all of this information with meaning it is a higher quality paint. However, if you even just look up the pigments that are in the gouache, you will see that half of the paints in the 24 set are not light fast. So the light fastness information is definitely wrong. So I'd say light fastness with this set is probably similar to the Reeves set. Also, I noticed a much bigger color shift with these paints than with other gouache paints, and it was a little more difficult to control the wetness of both my brush with this paint and the paint on the page. They take a little longer to dry. But it was, in terms of handling, a big upgrade from the Reeves for no price. So that's pretty impressive. This claims to be an American company, and they also make their paints in China, just like Reeves. The Arteza paints are also quite chalky. So now Holbein. I asked on Instagram what brand people wanted to see compared with Arteza and another brand, and people asked for Holbein, which made me a little sad inside because I have these tiny little 5 milliliter tubes of Holbein and I did not want to use them up. I should have known better because I've used them before and I barely used any, and that was the case again here. The colors are just so pigmented. You don't need anything. It's kind of amazing. I also want to say that this painting took way less time than the other two paintings, even though since I only have white, black, red, blue, and yellow, I had to mix every single color in this painting. So that should tell you something about the ease of use. Like, it glides like butter. You're able to mix a lot faster, even though you have a lot less colors. You can see that despite having to do a lot of mixing, this painting doesn't look muddy, whereas the Arteza paints, if I mixed to the same amount that I did with this one, they definitely would have been on the brown side with almost every color. I was able to get much more subtle colors with these paints without tons and tons of effort. The white is much more powerful. And because the consistency is just like so beautiful and fine, it was a lot easier to put details down. This was just overall like painting on easy mode for me. I didn't have to worry about weird consistencies or muddy mixing or anything like that. Everything just worked the way that it was supposed to work, which was just such a relief after painting with the other two paints. I think I'd have to say that the gap between the other two paints and Holbein is humongous, whereas the gap between Arteza and Reeves really hinges on the difference in consistency. Holbein is just way better in almost every way. It has better consistency, it has light fastness, it's way more pigmented, it's easy to mix. It's just got it all. Now, the one thing is though, it's way more expensive, whereas the Arteza and the Holbein are nearly the same price. The Holbein is $6.70 USD for 10 milliliters. And that is a lot because the Reeves and Arteza are less than $1 for 10 milliliters. If you wanted a paint that is really great and a bit cheaper, M Gram is really good if you're in the US because it is $4.89 for 10 milliliters or around there. And if you're in Europe, the Schmincke Horadam is probably the good bet on where to go for that if you don't want to pay as much as you would for the Holbein. And those are all three really great brands. One thing that I thought was really interesting was the amount of paint I used for the three different ones. I was pretty surprised about this. I used a ton of paint for both the Arteza and the Reeves paintings, but I used like literally almost nothing for the Holbein paints. It was absolutely crazy. You can see here, first the Reeves, then the Arteza, and then the Holbein. So even though they're super tiny tubes and they're way more expensive, they're going to last you way, way longer. I also just wanted to show you all three paintings side by side so you can kind of get an idea of how painting with these three different paints differed. If you are interested in seeing more comparisons of gouache like this and want to learn more about picking what gouache is right for you, definitely check out my class that I have called Your Guide to Gouache Brands. I compare 10 different gouaches on consistency, layering ability to put down flat colors, and a bunch of other criteria. I'll have the link to that in the description below. So I hope that you enjoyed this comparison. I personally learned a lot too, because before trying student grade paints for my latest gouache class, I had never actually tried student grade gouaches, and trying them really helped me understand some complaints that I have heard people had with gouache before. Also, if you want to see an in-depth review of Arteza gouache, that will be coming up in the future, so definitely make sure to subscribe and click that bell. Thank you so much to my patrons. You'll be getting scans of these paintings, and for just always being there and being so sweet. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and that it was helpful. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time, and until then, be gentle with yourself. Bye.